On Friday, Netflix releases the third and final part of its Fear Street film trilogy, which is based on the popular 90s book series by Goosebumps author R.L. Stine. In anticipation of this final installment, I sat down for a conversation with Fear Street star Sadie Sink, 4 S's. You may know Sadie best as Max Mayfield in the Netflix series Stranger Things, in which she famously accompanies Eleven on an 80s-style shopping montage. But in Fear Street, Sadie trades in Demogorgons for a witch's curse in her biggest role to date. Let's check out Fear Street.
Who's seen us?
Run! One way or another. You're gonna die tonight.
There it is. It's not just a diary, it's a map.
I'm not letting you die.
My sister's still out there!
Go, guys, go! We can end this.
You swore. It's becoming a habit.
So this was a really physical role for you, between the running and the fighting and just being covered in blood and sweat. What was the toughest part of filming a horror movie for you?
I mean, yeah, like kind of building up that stamina that was like so necessary for the role. That was not challenging, but just definitely something that was important throughout the process. There were a few challenging like stunt work scenes that we had to work through for several days. One being in like we're in like the science and nature cabin. It's like I think one of the early interactions with the killer of that movie, and you know that took a lot of like working out. But yeah, I definitely towards the end of it, I felt really confident with doing stunt work.
I bet, and probably screaming too. I mean, I would imagine your like throat must have been sore by the end of the day.
Oh yeah, they had these things on set. They would call them like screamy teas, just to like help everyone's throat because there's just so much screaming that took place on that set.
Yeah. So you've spent some time living in the 80s on Stranger Things, and you've spent some time living in the 70s and the 1660s in the Fear Street movies. Which era do you think you as Sadie are best suited for?
I mean, I honestly, I'd have to go with the 70s, just because I feel like everything was just so happy and simple. But then also, I remember like my time on the 1600 set and how cool that was. But I don't know if I could last more than like a week there.
Right. So horror movies often play into more rational fears like snakes and spiders and claustrophobia, but really great horror movies play into irrational fears like an axe-wielding madman brought back to life by a witch's curse. Do you have any wild, irrational fears?
I mean, I have a few that are just like really silly and stupid that I've just had. Like, I don't know where it comes from, but I really am scared of kind of, I don't like puppets. I don't like dolphins. Those are just a few random ones.
Dolphins?
Yeah. I love animals. No, nothing against them. I love them, but just I wouldn't be caught near one.
Well, that's a great way to end. Dolphin fears. No dolphins in Fear Street, but I really, really loved the movie and can't wait for people to see it. Thanks, Sadie. So I don't think I've ever heard of anyone whose irrational fear is dolphins, who are like notably the gentlest creatures of the sea. But, you know, we all have some of those weird irrational fears. How about you guys? Anyone have a weird one you want to confess?
Who's first? I can go.
Yeah,
I
go. Please.
have a weird. Okay, and it's really strange, but ever since I was little, I hated to be the last one to fall asleep if I was ever like in a house with people. So when I was younger, I would go to bed early while my parents were still downstairs watching TV, so I could hear the TV, I could hear them talking, and I'd be good. I could fall asleep. Even to this day, like me and my husband, if he's going to bed and he goes before me, I'm like, why didn't you tell me you were going to sleep? Because I hate falling asleep last for some reason. I don't know why. It's just, I feel like if something happens, I'm responsible or something. Like if someone breaks in, I have to be the one to fight the guy off. If I witness something that's crazy, I'm the only one who saw it, and you think I'm crazy when you woke up like that didn't happen. I'm like, yes, it did. So I need to fall asleep first. When I was at sleepovers, if I fell asleep after my friends, I'd freak out because I'd be in a dark room. I'd be awake by myself. I don't like it. I don't like that feeling, guys.
Kayla, I had the same fear when I was a kid. For the same exact reason, because there was something comfortable about knowing your parents were still up watching TV, so nothing bad could happen because they'd take care of it. But once they don't go to bed and you're still awake, it's like you're the one who's going to have to defend the house, like Kevin McAllister in Home Alone, because your parents have gone to bed. I had the same exact fear. Like I had to get to sleep before everyone else. Yeah.
Me too.
I'm glad my kids don't have this, right? Because I feel like my kids now stay up a whole lot later than I do. So I'd be in a whole lot of trouble if that was their fear, because I couldn't hang. It's like 9:30 and I'm going to bed.
That's hilarious. If I'm alone, I'm good.
They tuck me into bed now.
That is hilarious. Oh my God.
I've never had that problem. I'm like borderline narcoleptic, so I can fall asleep pretty much anywhere and have. Like I've fallen asleep at football games, baseball games. Like when I was younger, I actually fell asleep like on the toilet, which my mom made fun of me for forever. Like I've almost fallen asleep at bars. Like I've fallen asleep at people's houses. Like it's a whole thing. But, you know.
So don't go to Scott's house if you have this fear of mine.
Yeah, I just need to be like engaged. Like as long as like something, I'm talking to someone or whatever, it's fine. But like the second I'm just like left on my own, I'm like, so just shut down.
Does anyone else have an irrational fear?
It's very similar. Mine is similar to Kayla's, except I'm not afraid to be alone because I really do enjoy being alone. My fear is for my children to take a shower when they're home alone. If that makes no sense, right? But I have teenage girls, and I know they do things like flip their hair when it's wet, and I've got stuff all over the place. I'm always scared somebody's going to slip in the shower and I'm not here, right? So I ask them, please don't take a shower if I'm not home. Like, wait till I get home. Wait till your dad's home. Wait till your sister's home. Like, wait for someone to be home just in case. And it drives them crazy. I know. And yes, it makes me a little crazy. I'm not afraid to shower alone, but I'm afraid for them to shower alone.
So Liz, when I was growing up, my mom used to tell us to not take showers during thunderstorms, and we were never allowed if there was. And I thought, growing up, I thought this was a widely known thing. It wasn't until adulthood that I realized it's not true. Your house is not going to get hit by lightning, and you're going to die in the shower. But B, not everyone's parents told them that. It was just my overprotective mom and a couple of other overprotective moms, which no shade or anything, but like it's one of those like old wives' tales.
Thank you. It is, because I also heard the no showering during the thunderstorm. Don't use the phone. Remember that? When we had hard lines, like you couldn't use the phone when there was a thunderstorm. So yeah, I'm with you.
I feel like lightning was much more of a threat when we were younger. It's not so much of an issue now. I don't know. Maybe science has gotten better, but
yeah, lightning has really chilled out in the last couple decades.
Yeah, seriously.
Scott, do you have a real quick an irrational fear?
Yeah, totally. So I didn't realize that this was an irrational fear of mine until I watched Girls 5 Eva and listened to Sarah Bareilles' song. But like, I am deathly afraid of going on Ancestry.com and finding out that I have a bunch of half siblings who want to be in my life. Just to like that. No.
Just
stay away from it. No 23andMe, no Ancestry, nothing.
Well, you
Yeah.
are like live on Twitter right now, so one of your half siblings could be watching you.
Yes. Reach out.
You didn't
Reach out
see
to Scott.
anything. My real name isn't Scott. This is all fake.
That's not even your house in the background.
Exactly.
It's
This
all
is
fake.
all just green
Right.
screen. Like,
Nope.
Yeah.
Yep.
Love it.
Yep.
Wow.
All right. Well, if you can watch my full interview with Sadie Sink by visiting the What to Watch Live playlist on Xfinity's YouTube channel. And the thing that I really love about this Fear Street trilogy is that while the three films collectively tell a single story, they are each set in a different time period and pay homage to a distinct horror movie era. So we got to thinking, what is the best horror movie era of all time? And you can actually use your voice remote now to vote while we dive into some of our favorites, including the 1950s, the 1960s, the 1980s, and the 2000s. So I will kick things off. There is nothing I love more than a bad horror movie. And there was no better time for sci-fi and horror B movies than the 1950s. I mean, you want to talk about giant leeches, man-eating blobs, 50-foot women, incredible shrinking men, or creatures from the Black Lagoon. The 1950s had it all. If you could shrink it or make it colossal, Hollywood did it and played it in every drive-in theater from New York to LA. And the 1950s also marked the arrival of movie theater gimmicks like 3D and the Tingler and Smell-O-Vision, and the very first in-color 3D film from a major American studio was Vincent Price's 1952 classic, House of Wax. Of course, Vincent Price is one of the legends of horror, particularly during this era, in which he starred in more 3D films than any other actor, and House of Wax is one of his best and most deliciously campy performances. So that is why I love 1950s horror. Scott, yes, what do you got?
I'm so excited to talk about this because I have a lot to say. I mean, this is very much my genre. Can we go back, please, to David's title? I specifically love that we're talking about it from like a decade lens, just because like horror themes like have always organically changed with the times and like often reflect cultural fears and like societal unease of that time period. So I personally find that super interesting, and I hope that you guys do too. And I think a great example of this is like the predominant 50s theme, as you mentioned, were like big monsters causing epic destruction, which is like not dissimilar to, a bomb. But there's also like this paranoia that communists were infiltrating society. So it's no coincidence that movies like Body Snatchers and even House of Wax sort of leaned into this idea where you couldn't tell your friend from your enemy. So I love that you chose this one. And while we're still on your topic, a little fun fact about House of Wax is that the scene, spoiler alert, where the museum burns down. It was probably very easy for Price to look frightened when he was filming that, because right before they shot, the crew lit like 3 spot fires in strategic locations. Anyways, they started filming, and fire, super unpredictable, totally got out of control. It actually burnt a hole in the roof of the soundstage and singed Price's eyebrows off. But because like melting wax mannequins is super expensive, they just kept rolling even until like the fire trucks got there and were putting it out, which is just beyond. But they got the shot, so there you go. But yeah, moving on to my decade, which is obviously the best one, 60s and the 70s for the most part, was like probably the most violent and radical decades in America. We had a ton of assassinations of public figures. Racism was reaching this boiling point, and America, she was changing, girl. It was a thing. It was happening. There was this like counterculture that we're moving away from the sort of traditional American family. But yeah, so unsurprising that this like very, very dark time in American history brought out some really amazing horror films. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which gave us a little tour through rundown America. Rosemary's Baby, and then you got The Exorcist, like waging war on religion, which is okay, that's a thing. And then Halloween, where we go into the suburbs, where we got this guy with a mask just like slashing up babysitters, just like super chill, right? But one film from the 60s, I think, really takes the cake, and that is George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead, which on the surface, looks like a zombie film, but personally, and I think a lot of other people agree with this, that it's really a meditation on racism and the sort of demonization of people of color. The film's protagonist, Ben, is a Black man who, mind you, was not really ever seen on the screen like at this time, let alone one who sort of stepped up as a leader, like in a house full of white people. But the real monsters in this film aren't really the zombies. So major spoiler alert here. Cut to the end of the movie, Ben survived this onslaught. And as a viewer, you're sort of like, oh, yay, it's done. It's over. He's going to make it. And he hears these sirens and notices this squad of men who are like hunting down zombies. He's got to make it out. No problem, whatever. And then it happens. And it's like still triggering to this day. He's just like shot right between the eyes by one of the men. And that's it. It's like one of the men then makes this snide comment about like another one for the fire. And like to this day, it is still super, super jarring. They like sink hooks in him and then drag him out into the fire. It's absolutely terrifying. And personally, and frankly, I think it's like a little too close to today's current events. So feels a little strange and hard to watch, but definitely a classic horror film and highly recommend watching if you haven't already. So sorry for the long rant, but that's my pick. You're muted, David, I think.
You're on mute.
Come on, David.
No,
amateur
it had to
hour
happen
here.
one of these shows. My dog is losing his mind downstairs, and someone's ringing the doorbell. You know how this goes in this time
you got to keep treats in your pocket, David. That's what I'm saying.
He's locked out. So, Scott, where do you stand on the argument of, in terms of zombies, between running zombies and slow walking zombies?
In terms of which ones I find scarier?
Which one's better? Because I know that some of the newer movies have really fast jogging zombies, whereas Romero stuck closer to the slow zombie that we know and love, I guess.
That we all know and love. I mean, I would probably say that a running zombie is a little bit scarier, but I think the whole zombies aren't really scary because of the zombies. It's really like it's the people that you get stuck with and how they respond in this kind of like end of the world situation. That's the scariest part of like a zombie movie, in my opinion. And I feel like that's generally when you're watching a zombie movie, like, or good ones anyways, that's what they focus in on. It's about the dynamic of the characters kind of interacting and not so much the zombies. Because like, they're dead.
The closest I
Not
got
sure why I
was
would.
I Am Legend.
What's that?
I said the closest I've got to a zombie movie was I Am Legend. That's as close as I got,
that's
guys.
considered a zombie
trying.
movie, right? So
It is. Liz,
I'm not fighting a zombie. I'm not fighting a zombie, and I'm not outrunning a zombie. If there are zombies, I mean, it is time for me to die too, right? I'm not living
all right, David,
in a world
take
where
her
there
off
are
of our
zombies.
safe house list. She's no longer allowed.
Right.
Not fighting any zombies. No. Mm-mm.
we have an extra bed in the safe house now.
I'll take it.
Liz, you got it. Liz, what is your horror movie era of choice?
Oh, it's probably the only error, maybe sprinkled in recent, but it's the only time I remember watching scary movies because I do not like them very much, and I get a little too scared. I think this was the only time that I could handle it. And I'll tell you, my very first memory of going to a movie theater was to see A Nightmare on Elm Street. And yes, I'm dating myself. I was 7 years old, and I was probably driving in a car without a seatbelt while my mom was smoking her Newports. But that's a whole other show. Love Wes Craven, right? Love the 80s. This genre for me gave us, right, The Shining. We have Cujo. What else? I mean, speaking of dogs, Hellraiser, Friday the 13th. I mean, I feel like this was the time where it was the most scary for me. And Nightmare on Elm Street did it for me. I mean, even till this day, that song, I can hear it and still it triggers the 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. I mean,
No.
My ringtone.
he's melting. He's melting. I mean, I talk about being afraid to go to sleep, Kayla. I mean, you don't want to fall asleep. Yeah. And he, it was, I love this. I love this movie. I could still watch all of these movies. And not so much anymore. Once they started to get into that psychological stuff and I just can't do it anymore. So slash them up. I'm good. I can watch that.
Yes, hack and slash. Come on.
Yeah. And finally, Kayla, I mean, you famously are not a horror movie fan. We talk about it every show you're on. So what did you pick as your horror era?
Sorry, see, you're talking about horror. My daughter's crying.
Oh, no.
Triggered.
Well,
it was the song.
Do know
it was the song.
It was.
Yeah,
I do know that.
I should have done that. I should have done
Liz.
that.
Thanks a lot.
I'm sorry.
See that? Well, if you guys want to listen to me talk over this crying, I could try, but
you know what? I actually know what your pick is, Kayla. So you you take a beat, and we'll talk about Scary Movie, which was sort of like Anna Faris's debut in films and to the world. And boy, what a career she's had. But that was the Wayans brothers, I believe, wrote and maybe directed and produced that. A lot of really great gags, which kicked off like a whole line of like parody movies that we hadn't seen since like, you know, Airplane and Naked Gun is what I'm looking for. So then we got Scary Movie and Not Another Teen Movie and a couple other really great ones. So essentially,
Regina Hall is actually iconic in this film, like just so good. And I know I interviewed her a while back, and I was a little worried because I had done some research on it, and I read that she didn't like talking about her character that much. So, but then I asked her why she thinks gay people like gravitate towards her, or like that she resonates with them, and she's like, "Oh well, I think it all started with this character." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, you're probably right, actually." Like, there's that whole moment where she's got like the football helmet on, and she's like, it's so good. Like, she's just blissfully unaware, and then the movie theater scene, like watching Shakespeare in Love, like, oh my god, come on, like, so good.
It's very, very
it's so good. If I'm going to watch a scary movie, it needs to be funny. Okay.
That's it. You did it. You did the thing, Kayla. Yes. That was your line right there. If I'm going to watch it, it's got to be funny. Nailed it. Let's pull the poll back up real quick and actually give people a little more chance to vote right now. I know that last I checked, the 1980s was the era that was leading as best for horror. That's great. I mean, that's a popular era. All the Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. We got some, even Gremlins. I guess is sort of a horror movie.
Yeah.
That era. The Thing was maybe 79.
Yeah, I think that was a little bit closer. Don't quote me on that. I'm not exactly sure, but yeah. I mean, it sort of introduced so many of the iconic like killers that, you know, people know and love. So
yeah, 1950s is now in the lead, and I'm very happy about that. I'm obsessed. Well, first of all, I'm obsessed with like drive-ins, but these ideas of the gimmicks that they used to use in the 1950s to sell horror movies. Like there was a director and producer named William Castle who was sort of the biggest culprit when it came to these gimmicks. He had a movie called Macabre, and when it opened, he had fake nurses standing at the door to hand out life insurance policies that he had said he had paid for in case someone died of fright during the movie. And then for House on Haunted Hill, which was another Vincent Price movie, he had skeletons with glowing red eyes hanging from the theater roof or ceiling, and they would swing down at certain moments during the movie. And of course, the Tingler was another thing where they actually had little electronic buzzers rigged up to every seat in the theater, and it would vibrate when the Tingler came on the screen. And it's like, man, if I could go back and only watch movies in theaters from a certain era, like hook me up with all that crap, because that is fun theater experiences. I don't need recliners. Give me a buzzer wired to the bottom of my seat.
Just scare the crap out of me. That's it. I love
exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
So if you are looking to plan your own horror movie marathon, including Fear Street, just say horror movies into your voice remote.